evening. This is the I-24 News Evening Edition. I'm Lucy Arish, and these are the headlines. I was threatened by real bullets, so words do not intimidate me. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry hits back against criticism from the Israeli government on his peace efforts. Contradicting reports today on whether General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has begun his bid for the Egyptian presidency, but on the streets of Cairo, the campaign is already alive and well. And I-24 News goes to school in a lesson that broke the Guinness World Record for the largest ever online class taught by Israeli President Shimon Peres. Good evening again. Once again, the Israeli-U.S. relation is being tested. John Kerry has spoken out against recent criticism leveled against him by high-ranking Israeli officials. Despite many Israelis questioning his tactics on the peace process, the U.S. Secretary of State seems committed as ever to moving negotiations forward. I-24 News correspondent Charles Biblazer reports.
The criticism has seemingly struck a chord, and in response, John Kerry has made one thing clear. He never implied that Israel would face a boycott if current negotiations with the Palestinians fail.
I did not do anything except cite what other people are talking about as a problem, but I also have always opposed boycotts.
The latest strain in the Israel-U.S. relationship centers around Kerry's comments at last week's Munich Security Conference.
And you see, for Israel, there's an increasing delegitimization campaign that has been building up. People are very sensitive to it. There's talk of boycotts and other kinds of things. Are we all going to be better with all of that?
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called any attempts to sanction Israel immoral and unjustified. For his part, Strategic Affairs Minister Yuval Steinitz slammed Kerry, accusing him of holding a gun to the Jewish state's head. On Thursday, Tzipi Livni, Israel's justice minister and chief negotiator in the peace process, came to Kerry's defense.
In all these subjects, the boycott, the International Criminal Court, Kerry was the first one in the world who bothered to help us and defend our security interests.
But the war of words continues. The U.S. State Department condemned today a municipal decision to allow 558 new housing units to be built in East Jerusalem. Israeli Economy Minister Naftali Bennett immediately hit back, saying that wrong decisions made by the U.S. administration have contributed to the recent uptick in missile attacks from Gaza. Kerry, though, has been adamant that he will not be fazed, going so far as to invoke his experience in Vietnam.
I have to tell you, my friend, I've been, quote, attacked before by people using real bullets, not words. And I am not going to be intimidated. I am not going to stand down with respect to President Obama's commitment to try to find peace in the Middle East.
Irrespective of motives, it appears that Kerry remains committed to navigating the Israeli-Palestinian diplomatic minefield.
And still on the same subject, British Foreign Secretary William Hague told the BBC today that the world sees the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian peace talks as a, quote, last chance at reaching a two-state solution. Hague implied that if John Kerry, who has the full weight of the United States behind him, cannot bring the sides together, then nobody could. And joining me right now on the phone from Washington, D.C. is I-24 News correspondent Steve Cates. Good evening, Steve.
Good evening, Lucy.
So we hear right now the addition from Britain, and we hear John Kerry. How the attacks on the Secretary of State is seeing the United States?
I would tell you 0.0 chance of him running. There's plenty of speculation. There's plenty of people suggesting it. Only a little over a month ago, Bill Richardson, envoy to the UN and former governor of New Mexico, said they shouldn't rule him out. And in fact, kind of encouraging Kerry. But just as your reporter just indicated in that package, Kerry's run before it back in 2004, and it was a bruising presidential campaign. If you recall, you had people from Vietnam days running these swiftboat ads, accusing of him being unpatriotic and everything else. And Kerry did his best, but it was a bruising campaign. he's not up for it yet. He's done his time. He's doing a terrific job by most Americans' accounts on both sides of the political aisle. I think this is his swan song right now.
Yes, Steve Cates, it seems that John Kerry is not going to give up anytime soon. Thank you very much for this. Egypt's army said today that a Kuwaiti newspaper misinterpreted remarks by General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi in which he said he would run for president, though it seems it only matter of time until the official statement will arrive. I-24 News reporter Eli Ochenberg follows el-Sisi's way to the top.
Though the official confirmation is yet to come, the streets of Cairo are already getting prepared for the presidential campaign of Egyptian Army Chief Field Marshal Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Early Thursday, a Kuwaiti newspaper quoted al-Sisi saying he will run for president, a widely expected move. But after all the hype, only a few hours later, Egypt's military was quick to quash the report.
What was published in the Kuwaiti newspaper El Siyasa is merely journalistic speculation and not a direct statement from Field Marshal al-Sisi. It carried inaccurate expressions and phrases, especially after they were circulated in the different media outlets.
The statement added that the Field Marshal's decision to run for president is a personal one that he will announce by himself to the great Egyptian people and no one else. It will be done via clear and direct statements that cannot be doubted or misinterpreted. Egypt's interim government has not yet set a firm date for elections, but they could get started as early as mid-February and no later than April 18th. The Field Marshal has made many calculated steps towards the presidential elections.
El-Sisi is appointed as head of the Armed Forces and Defense Minister. Morsi is deposed. General el-Sisi topples Islamist President Mohamed Morsi. Egypt's referendum polls open. Egypt approves constitution by 98%. Interim President Adli Mansour promotes him to Field Marshal, Egypt's top military post. The Supreme Council of the Armed Forces gives el-Sisi the green light to run for president.
If elected, he will become the sixth military leader to rule Egypt since its independence in the year 1922. The decision has been made, el-Sisi was quoted as saying, "I have to fulfill the people's demands," and if these statements will turn out to be accurate, given his popularity and the lack of any serious rivals, el-Sisi's chances of winning the presidency are very, very high.
And joining me now is Dr. Tzvi Bar-El, Middle East analyst at Haaretz Daily newspaper. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for coming to the studio.
Pleasure.
So is Egypt's future clearly with el-Sisi?
Probably yes. I mean, the whole maneuver, which has started, in fact, a year and something ago, and then culminated into the toppling of Mohamed Morsi, was aimed directly to have a new regime, meaning that the army is in the picture. The question was whether al-Sisi himself will be the president or not. And what we hear from Egypt, what we hear from the interview that he has given to Siyasa in Kuwait is that probably he is going to run for presidency.
But isn't this what he was aiming to?
Yes, definitely. And in fact, he is just now cleaning the table in the army. He is going to appoint a new Minister of Defense immediately after being elected. And he has the full support of the public, except for the Muslim Brotherhood.
So there have been several incidents of violence from Islamist militants. Are we supposed to continue seeing this violence increasing in Egypt?
Probably yes, because it's not just the Muslim Brotherhood, and I'm not so sure that the Muslim Brotherhood themselves are involved in these terror attacks which Egypt are now facing. But the rest of the organizations which were operating in Sinai, which were operating in Ismailia, are still there, and probably they are going to stay for a while. And it's an ongoing battle between the army and between these organizations.
So we can say that basically nothing is changed from
Not
Mubarak's days.
Not really, because of what Sisi represents now the will of the public. Unlike Mubarak, that he was in fact falsifying the will of the public, right now Sisi would not have been the candidate or the major or the runner-up candidate for presidency had it not been for the public to support him in last July and then in August by toppling the Mohamed Morsi. On the other hand, I mean, on top of it, I would say that Sisi was not sure that he is going to be the president. Sisi was kind of cooperating with Morsi for a while, and it looked like kind of a coordination which might have worked properly until the public came out on the 30th of June and shouted and kicked Morsi out. I mean, it's the public through Sisi. Unlike Mubarak, Mubarak would have done it in a minute. He would just order the public or order the army to crush the public. And this is the whole difference.
Yes, it seems that it's going to be very interesting in the next few days in Egypt. Dr. Tzvi Barel, thank you very much for this.
Pleasure.
And we're moving on to Syria. The United Nations and Syria reached a deal to allow civilians to leave areas of Homs under army siege for more than 18 months. News of the agreement comes as rebel fighters announced today that they are planning a major offensive on regime strongholds in the city.
A new battle in Syria is looming, and many are fearing for the worst. The Islamic Front, a coalition of Islamist Syrian rebels, has announced an imminent offensive against the strategic city in northern Syria. The code name for the operation is unequivocal: the promise of truth approaches, referring to a Quran verse about Judgment Day. In a release, the Islamic Front called on all its forces to head to the front lines. Aleppo residents who live close to military bases have also been asked to evacuate the area for the next 24 hours. It's another nightmare for the civilian population, especially in the rebel-held parts of the city where President Bashar al-Assad's planes have periodically dropped barrel bombs. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, in just 5 days, these blind airstrikes killed some 250 people. Out of those, 73 children.
Yes. And a new report that came out today shows some shocking statistics on violence and torture of women in Iraq. It's just the latest evidence of the frightening treatment of women across the Arab world. I-24 News reporter Roni Ben Bassat looks at the details.
Women's rights in the Middle East once again arise debate. A new report by the Human Rights Watch organization tells the story of unlawful detention, torture, and intimidation of women in Iraq.
The abuses that we've documented against them are often typical of the abuses that men also face, which is torture, beatings, usually designed to extract confessions.
The allegations in the report are based on the testimonies of 27 female detainees, mostly part of the Sunni minority community, jailed as part of random and mass arrests of women as collective punishment for alleged terrorist activities by male family members. In addition to illegal detention, the report unveils harsh accounts of torture and rape of women by security forces.
نزع ملابسه كان يطلع جسمه علي ويحركه بوجهي هيجي ويضربني على عيني. قطب شعري منه وهيجي يلوي منه على جسمي. أعيط أصيح ما أقدر، كل ما أتحرك الكلبشة أكثر تصير على إيدي تخليني ما أقدر أتحرك بعد.
The women are often intimidated into signing confessions, sometimes out of fear their own family members will face similar fate.
أنتِ تعرضتي لاغتصاب وضرب ونتلات وهذا ويجيبون عرضك يريدون يفعلون. طبعاً تقول إيه؟ تقول أنا الفجرت، أنا قتلت.
We found dozens of cases of women who said they signed confessions due to torture. We have ourselves documented their torture on their bodies, seen the marks left behind. We have talked to judges who themselves have verified being put under pressure to convict women without evidence.
While in Iraq this form of torture is still considered illegal, in nearby Afghanistan, abuse of women may soon be protected by law. New legislation passed by the country's parliament eliminates victim testimony in cases of domestic violence, rendering justice for women raped by their family members virtually impossible. While the law still awaits ratification by the country's president Hamid Karzai, the message it sends is loud and clear. In today's Middle East, justice and security for women may as well be considered a luxury.
Yes, and joining me from Jerusalem now is Bill van Esveld, a senior researcher on the Middle East and North Africa at Human Rights Watch. Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for joining us. Bill, you were a major part of this report. What did you find most shocking in researching it?
I joined the main researcher on this report for a long trip in Baghdad, Iraq last year, and I was really just incredulous to meet women who had undergone severe torture and incredible threats that if they did not confess to charges against them, which the women vehemently denied, that then the same things that had happened to them, the same kinds of torture that happened to them, including using electric cables, being kept up for days on end without being allowed to sleep, being kept in extremely cold conditions, and in some cases sexually assaulted, would happen to their other female family members. Their daughters, their sisters, their mothers would experience the same torture that they had experienced if they didn't confess. Usually the confessions asked had to do with male relatives, husbands or brothers or fathers, who were alleged to have some involvement in terrorism by the Iraqi authorities. The women may have known something about it. In most cases, they had no idea. They told us, and it seemed to us credible that they had no idea. But they were being pressured to confess for that confession to be used as evidence against their male family members.
But it's, Bill, it seems that the situation is only deteriorating with time and not even getting better.
It's really upsetting that, we thought there was going to be a moment of opportunity on this specific issue. Of course, there are many fewer women detained in Iraqi prisons than there are men. But stories about sexual abuse, sexual harassment, horrible treatment, and other forms of torture made it into the Iraqi media last year. And in January of 2013, the Iraqi president promised that he was going to set up a number of commissions and really deal with this problem, to try and prevent horrible torture against the 1,100 women in Iraqi prisons. But a year later, virtually nothing has been done.
Yes, Bill, thank you very much for this, and thank you very much for this phone call. And joining me now is Soraya Khirfi, who, before becoming a producer at I-24 News, grew up in Morocco and lived and worked in several Arab countries. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining me here in the studio. So can we say that Afghanistan is the worst country for women to live in the Arab world?
Yes. Afghanistan, I want to make a small... Afghanistan is a Muslim world. They're Pashtun, not Arab, but being a Muslim world, they have a law which was passed at the parliament, and this law is voted against the woman and in favor of the aggressor. So the aggressor, who is a close member of the family of this woman, cannot be prosecuted. So it goes in contradiction with another law which was passed in 2009, where it was against violence on women. So this law still hasn't been passed by President Karzai, hasn't been signed, but I think we're going very much backwards.
We're going very much backwards. And there are countries like Morocco where women's rights are treated differently.
Effectively, right now, there is a series of NGOs who, co-financed by the European Union, have written a memorandum to the Moroccan government asking for the parity between men and women. And I think that we are going towards good thing in Morocco and maybe in Tunisia, because we have to understand that Tunisia was an open country for women until the Arab Spring, and it's coming back to it. So, but we have to watch over.
Yes, unfortunately in 2014, and it still continues. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you.
And coming up on this evening edition, I-24 News goes to school in a lesson that broke the Guinness World Record for the largest ever online class taught by Israeli President Shimon Peres.
More students that can
And an Israeli singer with Yemenite roots tries to break the circle of hostility between Israel and Yemen. Don't go anywhere. 2 minutes break, and I'll be back. Welcome back. The Sochi 2014 Winter Olympic Games are about to begin tomorrow in Russia as tension in the area reaches new levels regarding terror threats and the controversy around gay rights violation in Russia. I-24 News reporter Olga Shapiro has more.
Under a heavy cloud of security threats and controversy over gay rights in Russia, the Sochi Winter Olympic Games are on their way. Several American officials warned airlines today to be on the lookout for bombs hiding inside toothpaste. The Pentagon also announced that 2 American warships are on their way to the Black Sea to secure the Games. Nonetheless, Russian Deputy Prime Minister Dmitry Kozak sounds more positive than ever on the security measures in Sochi.
I would like to repeat once again that the level of the security in the city of Sochi is not worse than in New York, London, Washington, or Boston.
Without taking the security issue into consideration, President Vladimir Putin's administration will have to deal with another major obstacle: gay movements who oppose holding the Games in a country that they say does not protect their basic rights. Russian officials found it hard to answer these accusations, even today, months after the issue came out.
The gays can make propaganda about their sexual orientation among adults, but there is no need to involve children. I've already said this many times. This is prohibited by law in all countries, no matter whether you're straight or gay.
One more time for Nadia and Masha. Hell motherfucking yeah!
Meanwhile, in New York, members of the now famous anti-Putin punk band Pussy Riot made their first significant appearance in the Amnesty International concert. The Pussy Riot girls took the chance to send their message to the world against Putin and against the Sochi Games.
We will not forgive and we will not forget what the regime is doing to our fellow citizens. So we demand a Russia that is free, a Russia without Putin.
As the Olympic torch makes its way to the stadium, the tension is still high in the cold, sleepy city between Georgia and the Black Sea. Even before the curtain is raised on the first match, the 2014 Sochi Olympic Games deserve a golden medal for capturing worldwide media attention.
And our I-24 News correspondent Ilan Goren joins us right now from Sochi. Good evening, Ilan. Thank you very much for this. So, what is the latest?
Yes, good evening from Sochi, where the Olympic project is still very much work in progress. You can probably hear some people drilling and hammering away at the building next to us, working on one of what seems to be a new hotel, which is not finished yet. And but what we hear from the organizers is that the most important facilities, the ones behind me, the Olympic venues, these are ready. At least that's what they tell us. We've been out in Sochi today, where the Olympic flame, the Olympic torch relay, passed through the streets, where thousands of residents of Sochi could finally celebrate after 7 years of what they call hell, in which the city basically turned into a big construction site. But today it's time to party. That's the message that the Russian organizers would like to transmit to the world from Sochi today. We've also seen, of course, a lot of military, army, and police personnel, and the famous or infamous Cossacks, whatever you want to call them. They're not armed, but they're out in force on the streets of Sochi, trying to make people feel more comfortable ahead of the opening ceremony tomorrow. As for the opening ceremony, we cannot divulge too many details. We've seen some parts of the rehearsal. I can say one thing for sure: it's going to be very big and very colorful. And the rest of it, we will find out tomorrow evening here in Sochi, South Russia.
Thank you very much, Ilan, for this. And we're moving on. The once dominant company Sony has an unexpectedly forecast a $1.1 billion annual loss and a cut of an additional 5,000 jobs. The Tokyo-based company had earlier projected a $290 million profit as a part of restructuring plan, Sony will sell its personal computer business and split its TV division into a separate unit. The world's number 3 TV maker has lost money for 10 straight years as it struggles to keep up with an increasingly mobile and internet-based world. And new groundbreaking technology is set to revolutionize the world of prosthetics and restore the sense of touch to amputees. I24 News reporter Roni Ben-Bassat with the details.
Prosthetics have been around for years, but while remarkably helpful, they were always missing an important factor: a sense of touch. A team of scientists from the Swiss-based Technology Institute, EPFL, are about to change that and make history with a prototype prosthetic hand designed to allow patients to actually feel objects.
The hand has several sensors attached to each tendon of each finger, and we can use these sensors to understand the level of force the patient was performing while grasping an object. And we use this force information to deliver very precise stimulation to the different sensory nerves in order to restore this real-time sensory feeling into the nervous system.
After the process, the electrical signs are transformed into an impulse that the sensory nerves can interpret.
The first time they turned it on and we worked with the new hand, it was amazing because suddenly I could feel things that I haven't been able to for so many years, and it was a kind of, you can feel round things and hard things and soft things, and that was quite amazing.
This is the first time Dennis has been able to touch and feel objects in 9 years.
Soft.
While wearing a blindfold, he can grasp items and identify their shape and whether they are hard or soft. But for this team of scientists, it's only the beginning. The next step is to be able to bring these results to long-term applicability, outside of the laboratory environment and into daily life.
Israel's President Shimon Peres is not only the oldest leader in the world, but now holds the world record for delivering the largest ever online civics classes to more than 9,000 Israeli high school students. I24 News correspondent Shachar Pellet joins the educated participants.
At the moment, the record has already been established.
Much excitement swept through Israel today when a new Guinness World Record was set. President Shimon Peres delivered the largest online civics class in the world from Cisco's headquarters in Israel.
The number to beat for this record was 5,000 participants. And so far, we have counted 7,115 students, which means that the President of the State of Israel and all the students are Guinness World Record holders. So congratulations.
The participants included Jewish and Arab students in more than 200 classrooms across the country who were able to receive the unique lesson from Israel's #1 citizen.
The more students that can participate in this sort of lectures will augment the educated children. What we have to do is to invest in education at least as much as we invested in entertainment, and make it really approachable and available to all children.
Marco Frigati, the senior vice president of Guinness World Records, arrived in Israel to verify the record attempt in person and was kept busy as the numbers flowed in.
My guess is that we need to at least add another 4,000. So I'm still going to go back now and continue my counting, but we know already that this is enough to break the record.
An additional surprise awaited the 90-year-old president when he received the honors of becoming the #1 teacher.
Mr. President, I think you are holding now 2 Guinness World Records at the moment. Not only have you taught a wonderful civics lesson to more than 7,000 people, but you are the oldest head of state in the world.
Israel is known for developing the innovative technology required for a record of this scale. The gigantic class constituted a live example of the current ways to digitize education worldwide.
And the innovation that exists here is second to none. The second reason that we're here is what we call Digital Israel, and we're here to partner with the Israeli government in order to transform Israel, take it to the next step in terms of job creation, education, healthcare, high tech, and the cybersecurity in Israel.
Efforts to introduce the technology into classrooms across the country are already underway, hopefully a project which will reduce inequality in education, allow thousands to learn from leading experts simultaneously, and become the education of the future.
Though around 55,000 Jews still lived in Yemen in 1948, today the country has a hostile relationship with Israel and no diplomatic relations. Israeli singer Zion Golan, who holds Yemeni roots, dreams of performing one day in Yemen's capital of Sana'a.
Quite unfamiliar in Israel, but a huge hit in Yemen, Israeli singer Zion Golan is preparing for his next challenge, performing in a foreign country, one that he will likely never be able to enter.
I know that I'm well liked there. I don't mean to sound arrogant. Well liked, and so I provide them with the songs, and I enjoy that they are enjoying my songs. It makes me feel good.
Born in southern Israel, Golan was attracted to Yemenite music from an early age. He managed to learn the right accent, pronunciation, and grammar of the language. His recent song Sana El Yemen could often be heard in local radio stations in Yemen's capital of Sana'a, despite the boycott the country holds against Israeli products. Unfortunately for Golan, he cannot translate the success into profit.
I wish there would be peace, and then we could connect. That would be the best dream for all of Israel.
Zion Golan might be the perfect example of how music can build bridges between cultures otherwise considered enemies. Yemen, which has become one of the top strongholds of Al-Qaeda, is still considered as a threat to Israel among other countries in the world. But with a little bit of rhythm, sound, and inspiration, perhaps Golan could make the impossible possible and perform live from Sana'a.
Yes. Omri Caspi is the first Israeli basketball player that got to the NBA. This is his fourth year in the league, and he's currently playing for Houston Rockets. He spoke with I-24 News Sports Magazine. Here's some of what he had to say.
For me, is going up there every night and competing and trying to be the best role model I can be, and show a different side of Israel. A lot of people think Israel is, like you said, is just wars and people walking around the city with guns, and it's not true. So for me, I'm trying to be the best role model I can be on and off the court, and set example for young generation in Israel that everything is possible, and it's possible to make it to the NBA and play here and compete with the best on a nightly basis.
And joining me now for a look at the week's headline you may have missed is I-24 News media correspondent Anthony Grant. Good evening.
Good evening.
So what headlines did we miss this week?
Well, a very interesting, actually captivating headline from the Los Angeles Times, actually just from today in their column 1 feature, which is kind of front page, but a little bit off to the side. Mm-hmm. Great story called The Search for the Lost Nazi Diary.
Oh.
Yeah,
okay.
And fascinating stuff here. This basically, it actually reads like a spy novel. They're talking about the diary of Alfred Rosenberg, who of course was the Nazi Party's chief ideologue, confidant of Adolf Hitler and responsible directly for the deaths of about 2 million Jews in what was a Nazi-occupied Soviet territory.
Wow.
And basically, there was a son of a Holocaust survivor named Henry Mayer who works at the National Memorial for the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and tracked down these diaries, which were basically smuggled out of Germany after the Nuremberg trials by a Nuremberg prosecutor, ended up in a crazy professor's hands in upstate New York. The FBI was involved, and now basically they're on display finally in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and for the next one?
We also have the New York Post, an article about sort of a House Intelligence Committee chairman about Edward Snowden.
Yes.
And basically coming out quite strong, calling Glenn Greenwald a thief. This is, of course, the Guardian journalist who basically divulged the Edward Snowden secrets to the Guardian. And this very powerful congressman in the United States is basically saying that, well, actually, this guy's not so much a journalist, but a thief, and deserves to be jailed. So this is very strong language.
It seems that Snowden's not going to get out of the headlines anytime soon.
No, and also Glenn Greenwald is based in Rio de Janeiro and has said that he has no immediate plans to come to the United States. When you hear statements like that coming from Capitol Hill, it's no secret why he wouldn't want to get near Capitol Hill.
Yeah,
so
I wonder why.
We wonder why, yeah. This story, I think, didn't get too much play, but it's quite interesting. It was covered on USA Today and also The Wrap, another news source in the States about the Sochi Games. AT&T, huge multinational company based in the United States, has protested Russia's so-called anti-gay propaganda law. Now, they did this on their blog post of their company, and they decided independently to condemn this Russian, very controversial law, even though they're not actually sponsoring anything at this specific games. They wanted to take a stand, and a lot of other corporate sponsors have not. So it's quite interesting to see them take that bold stance. One could say that, well, they're not actually sponsoring, so they have nothing to lose, but they had a lot to gain in terms of good publicity for their corporate image.
Okay, so do you think that Vladimir Putin saw that?
I think he's probably busy with the Russian phone companies trying to get them to work in Sochi. They had some problems there.
Definitely. And for the next headline?
A time from Libération, a great French newspaper, a little left-leaning, talks about a journalist, Patrick Cohen, who is accusing another journalist, Daniel Schneiderman, of feeding anti-Semitism against him. In a nutshell, this is about the whole Dieudonné controversy.
Yes, of course. That's a big issue right now.
I mean, this is a guy who's been forbidden from going to the UK because of his racist views. Basically, the article is saying that Patrick Cohen, who's a well-known French journalist, complained a few months back that Dieudonné was invited onto a talk show. It started a whole controversy, and it continues.
Yes, Anthony, you will be here again next week. Don't forget.
Thank you.
And we're moving just from Israel right now. The Israeli Iron Dome defense system intercepted 2 rockets in southern city of Ashkelon. The rockets were shot from the Gaza Strip. No casualties have so far been reported. And before we're finishing, Jay Leno's final show airs tonight as host of the legendary American talk show, The Tonight Show. After 22 years filled with great battles to keep his chair, especially against main rivals such as Conan O'Brien, who replaced Leno for a year as host, and David Letterman, who was aiming for the prestigious slot himself back in the early 90s. Leno is clearing his desk for the relatively young Jimmy Fallon, who will bring the show back from LA to its original home at 30 Rock in New York, with hopes ratings will keep the veteran show on top. Too bad. I love Jay Leno. Still ahead on this I-24 News Evening Edition. The daily debate, security threats, gay rights and corruption. But what about sports? The Sochi Winter Olympics begins tomorrow. Will the Russian president deliver? And on One-on-One with Israeli opposition leader Yitzhak Bougie Herzog, could he be the country's next prime minister? All this and more. 2 minutes break, and I'll be back.